Halloween of 2022 ended up being the scariest night I've ever experienced. I live in New Zealand, and since Halloween isn't celebrated here as much as it is in other countries, we usually don't get many trick-or-treaters, maybe 5 or 6 kids at most. Personally, I've always loved Halloween, even though my parents don't really care for it and prefer to just ignore it altogether. That means it's usually my job to handle everything, putting up decorations, setting out candy, and trying to create some Halloween atmosphere. That year, Halloween happened to fall on a weekday. A thunderstorm started not long after 6 in the evening, which basically ruined all the time I spent decorating. Still, I decided to wait in the living room, just in case any trick-or-treaters showed up. I turned on The Conjuring to pass the time. About an hour and a half later, I got a message from my friend Liam in our group chat. He asked if anyone wanted to go trick-or-treating just for fun. At first, I thought he was joking. None of us had done that in years. But since the night was already turning out to be uneventful, I figured it could be fun. The rest of our friends, Sarah, Callum, and Henry, all agreed too. We asked Liam where we should meet up, but a few minutes later, he said he couldn't actually go. That struck me as ODD, considering he was the one who came up with the idea. Still, he suggested a house that supposedly gave out a lot of candy. Within half an hour, the 4 of us, me, Sarah, Callum, and Henry, arrived at the address he mentioned. On the porch was a table with a pumpkin-shaped bowl full of lollipops. We peeked through the windows to make sure no one was watching, then split the candy between us, leaving a few pieces so it wouldn't look obvious that we had taken everything. As we turned to leave, 2 men in clown costumes began walking up the driveway toward us. Their faces were painted with huge fake smiles, and both of them had their heads tilted slightly to one side. The sight of them sent a chill down my spine. None of us said anything. We were just frozen for a moment until one of my friends screamed. That's when the clowns suddenly started running straight at us, one of them squeezing a rubber nose that squeaked as they chased. We sprinted away as fast as we could, not daring to look back until we were sure we had lost them. Out of breath, we decided to go to Liam's house since it was close by, and felt like the safest place to figure out what just happened. When he opened the door and saw us, he burst out laughing. "What are you guys doing?" he said, completely confused. "You told us to go trick-or-treating," Sarah said, still panicking. "Just let us in." After we all sat down inside, Liam explained that he had lost his phone earlier that day. Someone must have found it, and it was that person who texted us in the group chat, luring us to that house. We all went quiet once we realized what that meant. Whoever those clowns were, they might have set the whole thing up. About 30 minutes later, I finally made it home. Around 9:30 p.m., I finished the movie I had been watching earlier, then went outside to bring in the candy bowl I had left by the door. To my surprise, it was completely EMPTY, not a single piece left. But what made my stomach drop was seeing a clown nose lying inside the bowl. I ran inside and told my parents everything that had happened. They tried to calm me down, saying it was probably just some Halloween prank. That night around 1 a.m., I woke up to a soft tapping sound at my bedroom window, like small stones hitting the glass. My heart was pounding, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowly pulled the blinds open. My decorations were UN scattered across the ground below my window. I just stood there, staring in shock, until something hit the window again. A lollipop. When I looked up, I saw them. The same 2 clowns, crouched on my neighbor's roof, staring down at me. I screamed and ran straight to my parents' room. I'll skip the details that came after, but the police were called. The officers searched the area, but the clowns were gone. They said they would check out the house we went to earlier that night. About half an hour later, they left. The next morning, we found out that the house was completely abandoned, and Liam's lost phone had been discovered inside. At school, later that day, my friends told me that each of them had weird, creepy things happen near their houses that same night. I don't know if the clowns followed us home or if they somehow tracked us using Liam's phone. All I know is that Halloween is only a few weeks away again, and the thought of them coming back still makes my skin CR-wow-wow. When I was a kid, something unsettling happened one Halloween night. I must have been about 8 or 9 years old. I was planning to go trick-or-treating, and my older sister, who was 16 at the time, came along as my supervisor. I had wanted to go by myself, but my parents refused. They said I was too young to be walking the neighborhood alone after dark, even on Halloween. We left home around 6 in the evening. I was dressed as a football player. Our neighborhood was pretty big, filled with long streets and plenty of houses close together. The plan was to go up and down our street and maybe hit 3 or 4 others, depending on how much time we had. My sister would stay on the sidewalk while I ran up to each porch for candy. There were plenty of other kids and parents out, so everything felt normal. About 2 hours later, I walked up a long driveway a few blocks over, rang the bell, and the homeowner dropped some candy into my bag. But when I turned around to head back down the driveway, I noticed an old-looking minivan parked on the side of the road. The driver was talking to my sister. I didn't think much of it at first, but as soon as I reached her, the van pulled away. My sister told me that the man behind the wheel had offered her a ride. She said he kept insisting even after she told him no, trying to convince her to get in. That alone made both of us uneasy. We kept walking, and I went to a few more houses. Maybe 20 minutes later, we saw the same van again, this time coming toward us slowly from the opposite direction. When it reached us, the driver rolled down his window. He was a scruffy-looking man with long hair and a beard. As he leaned toward the open window, he greeted us and asked again if we needed a ride. My sister quickly told him no, and we kept walking. He gave this weird grin and said, "You sure?" before driving off. That was enough for my sister. She decided we should head back. It was getting late anyway, and the number of trick-or-treaters had dropped off. I still wanted a bit more candy, but I agreed. We stopped at maybe 10 more houses, then started the walk home. On the way back, we passed a small park that sat between 2 sections of the neighborhood. Across the park, I could just make out the same minivan again, creeping through another street nearby. We picked up our pace, hoping to reach our house quickly. When we finally turned onto our street, it was still a long walk to our house at the far end. That's when we heard an engine behind us. We turned and saw the van, again. Even though it was still a ways back, we both recognized it immediately. My sister told me to go up the driveway of the nearest house, one I had already been to earlier. We hurried up to the porch together. From there, we could see the van slowing down in front of the house. It looked like it almost stopped, but then it kept going. As soon as it disappeared down the street, we got back on the sidewalk and walked as fast as we could. This was before cell phones were common, and my sister didn't have one, so we couldn't call our parents. The street was mostly EMPTY now, and every shadow felt like it was watching us. A few minutes later, we spotted the same van again, this time parked along the curb ahead of us. To get home, we had to pass it. We exchanged a look, then just decided to go for it, walking faster and faster until we were almost jogging. The van stayed still as we went by, but then we heard it start up and move behind us. Our house was finally in sight, and we both broke into a full sprint. We ran across the yard, burst through the front door, and locked it right away. My sister found our parents and told them what had been happening. When my dad looked out the window, the van was parked right in front of our house, but no one appeared to be inside. He actually went outside and walked up to it, knocked on the window and looked inside, then came back saying it was EMPTY. It definitely wasn't anyone from our neighborhood. About half a minute later, someone tried the back door. We all froze, knowing exactly who it had to be. My dad shouted from the kitchen that he was calling the police. Seconds later, we saw a man run around the side of the house, jump into the van, and speed off. The police came soon after. We told them everything we could remember, and they said they would try to track the guy down. I don't know if they ever did, but he never came back. I still remember how scared we were that night, but I'm just grateful my sister and I made it home safe. It was Halloween night in 2018. My parents had asked me to be in charge of handing out candy that year. My mom had gone completely overboard. She bought so many bags of sweets that I knew we'd be stuck with them for weeks. I was trying to lose weight at the time, so I already dreaded the idea of having leftover candy around the house. We lived at the end of a cul-de-sac, a quiet spot where not many kids usually came by. Still, there were always a few regulars who knew our house was generous with treats. Since Halloween fell on a Monday that year, things were already quieter than usual. I was in college then, and luckily my schedule gave me Mondays and Wednesdays off, so I had spent that morning at the gym and the afternoon finishing some schoolwork. Around 4 p.m., I started hearing kids outside. which meant trick-or-treating had begun. The doorbell rang for the first time not long after that, maybe between 4 and 5. The evening went as expected, just the usual cycle of opening the door, handing out candy, and listening to our dog Milo bark like crazy every time the bell rang. From about 4 p.m. until 8 p.m., I guess we only had about a dozen or so kids. Like I said, our location wasn't ideal for trick-or-treaters. Most skipped the dead-end street entirely. By 8 o'clock, things had calmed down. It being a Monday night, people were wrapping up early. I finished some more of my homework, ate some of my mom's leftover stew, and headed to my room to watch Game of Thrones. I was a couple episodes in when the doorbell rang again. Milo started barking right away. I glanced at the clock. It was about 9:30. That was definitely past the time anyone should still be trick-or-treating. I went downstairs and opened the front door, keeping the glass storm door closed. Standing outside was a tall man dressed in a clown costume, wearing a creepy-looking mask. I could tell right away from his build that he was an adult, not some teenager. He waved at me and pointed at the small brown paper bag in his hand, which looked nearly empty. I didn't open the storm door. Instead, I called out through it, "Sorry, we're out of candy," and quickly shut the main door, locking it immediately. I regretted answering the door at all. I had assumed maybe it was a late working parent trying to take their kid around for a few last houses, but whoever that was did not seem like a parent or a kid. The person was way too big, and the costume made him look even larger. Luckily, I hadn't picked up the bowl of candy before answering, so he couldn't tell I was lying. I stayed by the door for a few seconds, listening for footsteps walking away, but I didn't hear anything. Then, suddenly the doorbell rang again. Milo lost it, barking even louder. He's a small dog, a Jack Russell mix, so while he's noisy, he's not exactly intimidating. I scooped him up, turned off the downstairs lights, and carried him upstairs. I figured if the house looked dark, maybe the clown would take the hint. I shut Milo in my room to stop the barking, and stood quietly at the top of the stairs. That's when I heard a loud snapping noise from the front door, like the latch on the storm door had been forced open. A few moments later, there was Kay knocking, and then the sound of the doorknob being rattled. At that point, my heart was racing. I went back to my room and texted my family group chat, explaining what was happening, but no one responded. I just hoped the person would get bored and leave. I thought about messaging my friends to ask if it was a prank, but honestly, none of them were tall enough to fit the description of that guy. I tried to distract myself by turning my show back on, pretending it wasn't happening, but then the doorbell rang. Again, I just sat there frozen, telling Milo to be quiet. I didn't dare open the blinds. I didn't want him knowing which room I was in. I tried calling my dad, but he didn't answer. I called my brother next. He picked up, but I could tell he wasn't alone, probably with a girl. I told him to check his messages and said, "There's some guy dressed as a clown at the door who won't leave." He brushed it off as a Halloween prank and told me to ignore it. That explanation made sense, but it didn't make me feel any better. A few minutes passed and the bell didn't ring again. I started to relax a little, thinking it was finally over. I turned off my TV, lay down, and must have dozed off not long after. I don't think I was even asleep for half an hour when I woke up to Milo quietly growling. He was sitting up staring at the window, letting out soft barks like he was waiting for me to react. I whispered for him to stop, but he wouldn't take his eyes off the window. Then I heard a faint tapping noise from outside. It sounded like something brushing or dragging along the glass. My room was on the second floor, so there shouldn't have been anyone outside that window. I hesitated for a second, then slowly reached over and lifted the edge of the blinds. That's when I saw it, the same clown mask, staring right back at me from the other side of the glass. He tilted his head slightly, and I screamed as loud as I could. I don't remember if Milo barked or not. I think I just blocked everything else out at that moment. I bolted out of the room, phone in hand, and ran into my parents' bedroom. I locked the door behind me and called 911. I could barely speak, my hands were shaking, and my voice was cracking. I must have asked the dispatcher every few seconds how long it would take for officers to arrive. She kept telling me they're on the way. It felt like forever, but the police got there in about 10 minutes. They checked around the outside of the house for signs of forced entry. The latch on the storm door had been broken, just like I had thought. And leaning against the wall beneath my bedroom window was my dad's ladder. The man had gone into our shed and used it to climb up to my window. I packed an overnight bag and went to stay at my friend Aaron's house after that. To this day, I still don't know if it was meant to be a cruel prank or if that person was planning something much worse, and the only thing that stopped him was me waking up when I did,